Oh, thank you, Selon. I think I'm actually tuned to the program, so I'm listening to all the arguments that have been discussed here. So I am actually a part of the discussion going forward. And I've listened to the various views that have been shared, but I'm going to share a dimension that none of your what do you call it? Your panelists has actually raised. And that this goes back into some level of historicity and trying to create a context for all of this. Now, if you go into the history of education, you see that all of these things evolve, and the role of the Christian church in shaping education and the government adopting education, and then there comes in. Now, I heard one of your panelists, who is a learned person, say that.
Okay, we have four. All three of them are. We have a prof. And we have two.
Okay. Yes. All three, I know. Okay, all three are. Good. So salute my learned panelists. Now, so you have this situation where you have the public now entering education when, in fact, the churches have already gone so many years ahead of them. Now, so let's fast track this history and come to this. But I want to put one thing inside. Now, the significant aspect of this whole history is that in the relationship between the government and the mission schools, there was a particular agreement that was signed. So you cannot say that, of course, when they receive assistance from government, they are public schools, so to speak, fair and simple. But there is a partnership agreement between the churches and government in the management of those schools. So when you come to the whole debate about, the mission schools are public schools, so public schools, no, that would have to wait a little bit, because then we have to go into the details of the partnership agreement, which defines how government relates with the schools. So that is one part that I'll leave that. But let me come to the policy aspect. Now, I can say for certain and without fear of contradiction that in education, we have never developed a religious policy. We don't have a religious policy in education. Anybody who can correct me if he or she knows. But what we have close to a religious policy is the categorization of schools into two groups. And I'm sure many of you remember, there are two groups. One, non-denominational schools, and then mission schools. Those are the two categories that we have. Now, most non-denominational schools are public schools, especially at the secondary level. At the primary level, we set it up, yes, but that is not what we are talking. At the secondary level, so you have a non-denominational school like my favorite Winneba Secondary School, and you have a mission school like Wesley Girls. The two are not the same. The conditions under which they operate are not the same. I'll give you an example. In Winneba Secondary School, we will not have any what we call structure representing any mission, any religious group in that space, which means that we don't have a church, we don't have a mosque, we don't have even a small shrine anywhere in any corner. It is forbidden, because the school is a non-denominational school. Now, when you go to the mission schools, they already have a partnership with government, and so they can establish their churches, to build their churches and all of those things. Now, I don't know whether they envisage one day that some other groups will come in, but they don't create opportunities for the building of, let's say, a mosque or a shrine in their religious space. So that is the point from which we depart. Now, let's come to the other things. Now, when you get into the schools itself, one of your panelists talked about scripture union. Now, the scripture union was the small inroads into the mission or the religious discussion, because then it allowed the what we call the charismatic groups to enter into that space and also do their own thing. That, as one of them said, truly, they also created a space for themselves. But largely, it was the mission. If it was a mission school, it was a mission that existed. Now, in the non-denominational schools, you could have SUs, and any religious organization that anybody wanted to form, and you were allowed to operate. But you don't normally find many of them. When I was in school, we didn't have any Muslim group in my school. We had SU and some affiliated Christian religious groups. So you see, when it comes to the concept of freedom of religion or freedom to practice your religion, that is a very difficult concept in education. It's a very difficult concept because the school is a system. It is programmed. We manage every second in schools. So when you structure the school system, you have a time when students should be in a particular place at every time. So it then becomes some very interesting reconfiguration to maybe slot in what we are discussing here as freedom of religion. I'm yet to properly understand it in terms of the coherence that we want schools to have in terms of their religious practice. But again, it does not stop anybody. And I'll give you Winneba Secondary School again. In Winneba Secondary School, your Sunday morning was free to go to anywhere you want to go and worship. So for students who want to go to town to go and worship, maybe in their churches in town, they received exeat and off they went. I don't know of an experience where religious Islamic students were able to go and join their colleagues in town. But of course, if they were there, they would have been allowed to go because it is a non-denominational school. And those of us who are in other Christian groups will go and worship in the classrooms and do our prayers in the classrooms. Now, so there was an opportunity for you to do what you wanted to do. But then we had one activity in the school, just as they have said, where everybody must gather there. You must be in that place as a student. And that is the one that my colleagues have been calling church service. We call it church service for the want of a better description. But in that church service, it is actually a church. It is a gathering place where you don't have only a Presbyterian priest preaching, you don't have only a Methodist priest preaching, you don't have only an Anglican priest coming to the school to preach. You don't anybody can come and preach. And then on and on we went. So that kind of practice exists. But it is not the same as in mission schools. In mission schools, they are established by mission. They are in partnership with government for various reasons. So it becomes very difficult for them to suddenly adjust to a shake-up that will allow them to incorporate all of the emerging issues about religion that are coming in our modern day parlance. So, as somebody said, a lot of patience and time is required to deal with this. And especially as we talk about the local parentis issue. As we talk about local parentis, there's a huge responsibility on schools. You know, where you don't take the children for granted and you don't do anything that you want to do with them. You must really be a parent for them in school. So you don't just allow them to do anything. If you observe that some group of people are fasting and they are seriously fasting, you will go in and question them, why are you fasting? Because you don't want a situation where a child will break down during maybe a morning assembly or when girls are sitting down and doing their morning assembly, and then you go and realize that the guy has been fasting and she already has a problem with ulcer, and then it gets complicated. And then immediately parents will jump on the head of the headmistress and then there's chaos. So those are things that we need to balance and appreciate with each other. But I can tell you one thing. My brother from my disco, I'm sure he remembers, that is the one situation that immediately shook the Ghana Education Service in relation to this whole religious discussion. That is when a student who did not go to service in the evening, and then when the master was coming around, we were in the classroom, when the master was coming around, the student jumped from either the second floor of the classroom block and landed and died. Now, that was a real wake-up call for us to begin to look at this situation. Well, we managed to talk about it. We also came up with this same brouhaha, and we managed to ensure it. But you have to state that even though there were Muslims or other religious faiths in mission schools, their situations have been very cordial. And none of them have resisted or announced or demanded that they wanted specific religious rights or rights to worship their religion, or even they were prevented from doing what was their religion. It has been harmonious all through this time. And so at least I'm beginning to wonder and worry where this is coming up. Now, the second one has to do with our friends and colleagues from Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, you know, at the basic level, they have a Wednesday morning worship. The Jehovah's Witnesses, most of them do not attend. And that also became a crisis at the basic level. And I had to go into just allow the teachers to make sure that don't force the Jehovah's Witnesses. If they say they can't come and join you people trying to pretend that you are speaking tongues or worshiping in some special way, and they say that that is not their way and they can't be part of it, please allow those students to sit in the classroom and separately. You know, so we manage that. I believe that there are still segments of that confusion still roaming around in school. Now, so that for me is exactly how the situation has been. And for me, when it comes to religious rights, as I said, it's a very, very difficult expression in education because, again, it would lie heavily on government to begin to look at how it will expend resources to be able to build those structures in all schools in the country. Winneba Secondary School will not use its budget to build a mosque or a church. If the government wants to promote what I believe many people think is freedom of religious worship, then it will have to provide those things to ensure that people can recognize that their religious rights are being respected. And I taught in a Muslim school, where a predominantly Muslim environment school, where the children, on Fridays, you know, the Islamic worship has a range of time in terms of their worship period. Now, around 12 in the afternoon, when the students normally close, or as my friend said, Tia Ahmadiyya would have closed, inside Boku, we insisted that no, the prayer period extends up to 2 o'clock. We will not allow you to close at 2 o'clock, but close at 12 o'clock, but close at 2. And the students just kept quiet, and they agreed. So at 2 o'clock, the whole school closed, and there was freedom. They could go and pray, and then go to the dining hall, and all. That meant that they would delay dining against those people who were not Muslims, who had to wait for them to finish their Friday prayers before all the school joins the Muslims to go and educate. So it's a very dicey situation when we begin to look at it. When we begin to literally insist on our specific rights of religion without looking at the school context, I think that the government must be ready to revise its 2026 budget and begin to put on the construction of structures for religious worship in schools to ensure that there's a real balance. Because I think that we are heading for something that would require a bit of a serious discussion.
I see. You said a number of things and very comprehensively dealt with the matter. The first one having to do with the non-denominational and then the mission school. So your view is that we must still, you know, uphold this categorization. So, for example, Wesley Girls is a mission school as against Achimota being a non-denominational school. We cannot expect the two of them to behave the same, even though they are both publicly funded. That's the point you raised, number one. That's the point I raised. Number two, you raised a point about what pertains in Winneba Secondary School, for example, because that's what you know. Of course, you've been GES boss, but you are familiar with Winneba for obvious reasons. So if a philanthropist, or maybe a church or an Islamic group, wants to build a mosque or a church on campus, given that you said no religious group was allowed to build those facilities in the school because it was secular, would you allow such a group or philanthropist to make such an investment in a mosque or a building that can be used for church, for example?
That matter came up to me when the Adisco case happened. And we had to discuss that. And my position, I still hold it. I say that allow the non-denominational schools to continue to be non-denominational schools. I cannot supervise the building of a church in Winneba Secondary School. I would neither supervise the building of a mosque in Winneba Secondary School. In fact, during that period, we were still going through the transition of colleges of education being under the Ghana Education Service when they were training colleges. So I was very upset when the principal of Accra Training College caused a mosque to be built at Accra Training College, because I said that he had violated the non-denominational nature of most of our non-denominational colleges of education. Because when you do that, then you begin to allow specific interests to come and explore opportunities to create or deepen the kind of division that we are really talking about. So I say that let us allow the non-denominational schools to have non-denominational structures. Other than that, I would say that if you want to build a mosque, please, you must build a church. Or I will have to get somebody you to come and build a church, because there is no way we would have to tilt the balance in terms of the non-denominational nature of the school in the interest of any religion.
I see. That's interesting. Very interesting points you raised. Now let me speak to the